Hi Juicy Co-Creators! I'm here today in Salt Spring Island, beautiful British Columbia in Canada with Jason.
Hi.
This man is passionate about dolphins and whales, and I know a lot of you guys too that are watching. You did an extensive research on them. It is your big passion for the past 10 years.
Absolutely.
And you're from England originally.
Originally from a little town where there used to be a dolphinarium, and the first time I saw dolphins there, I was 6 years old. And I saw all these dolphins swimming around a pool. It was a show, and I loved what I saw. I loved the dolphins, but I hated where I was seeing it because they were locked up in this concrete pool. It was horrible. But you know, when you're 6, you can't really explain things. You can't really say that this is right, this is wrong, but you can feel those things. And so I couldn't put it into words, but I knew that I'd seen something that was going to change my life. And so about 10 years later, I got the chance to go to university, and everyone at this point normally says, so did you study marine biology? And the honest answer is no, because I'm really squeamish. And so I realized also I was interested in the impact that dolphins and whales have on people. So my choice of study was actually psychology. And through the years of studying psychology, I actually found myself going to Australia to see something very different from what I'd seen in Yorkshire all those years earlier, which was dolphins in the wild. And I looked into the eyes of this one particular wild dolphin. She was the grandma of the pod, and she was in a beach that dolphins have been using for probably 40 years now to come into the shallow waters, roll over, look at people in the eye and kind of cast a magic spell almost. And certainly she cast a spell over me that day. I looked into this dolphin's eyes, and I kind of knew at that point that, yes, my course was set. Dolphins and whales were going to be a major component of my life.
So what can we learn from them? There's a lot to learn from them, but what mainly, do they even have a message for us? Or?
I think dolphins and whales have an amazing message, but it's, how can I put it? I think that they have a message if we choose to look at their behavior and celebrate them for being experts at what they are. There's nothing better at being a dolphin than a dolphin. And there's nothing better at being a whale than a whale. And we can look at the way they live their lives in cooperative groups. They do have disputes, but they settle them quickly. They look out for each other. They communicate clearly. They use many different senses to communicate. And they're aware of the environmental impact on the oceans. They don't leave a mess behind them. We can look at all of these kinds of things and I think be inspired and see them living their lives very fully and wonderfully as dolphins and whales. I think to say that they are messengers, that they have come to this planet to tell humans this or to teach humans that, is a very egotistical thing. You know, are we really so important as human beings that dolphins and whales have appeared purely for our benefit? I don't want to confine them and make it that tiny, you know, that they're here in a sense in our dominion, you know, to teach us something because that's all they want to do. I think they can teach those who are willing to look and learn and be inspired by them. But I also think that they're very, very happy being dolphins and whales, and that even the many, many hundreds of thousands of whales that live their life in the open ocean and never see a human being is living a very full whale life. You know, it's not contingent on, I've got to go see the people.
But it seems like they bring a real love and a connection that you probably felt through their eyes that changed your life.
Oh, absolutely.
So we should all have a dolphin whale experience.
Oh, I think so.
It's transformational from what I'm seeing.
I think it's very transformational because I think for me it was in a sense related to what I just said. It was when I looked into the eyes of this dolphin, it was like looking into the eyes of a very, very content, happy, full, complete being. It wasn't a being that needed me. Maybe I needed the dolphin experience more than the dolphin needed a human experience. It was looking at a dolphin and seeing that she was part of, in fact, she was the matriarch of a pod, of a group that was really very self-contained, that spent a lot of the day playing, that spend a lot of the day exploring, that spend a lot of the day resting. And yes, when dangers like sharks come along, they have strategies to deal with this very well. So I think what I was looking at and what was transformational for me was seeing a wholeness there, a real wholeness. And maybe that's what touches people, that when we see dolphins and whales, we see something that's very complete, that's very whole, that's very is able to embody joy and skill and intelligence and playfulness. And let's face it, good looks. I mean, dolphins have a smile, whales have a perfectly aquadynamic, slender body. I mean, they're aesthetically very pleasing. So there are many things that appeal to us when we look at them, but I think it's their sense of wholeness that is what inspires us the most. And that, for me, I would say that's what I learn from them, is the message of being complete, of being complete in oneself, of not seeking external guides or gurus. I mean, the last time I checked, there weren't any gurus in the whale world, and amen to that.
So how are whales and dolphins similar?
How are they similar? Well, of course, they both like hanging around in the same environment, the same element of water. They're similar in as much as biologically they are from the same family, ultimately. And they also are very social as well. That said, dolphins actually spend their entire lives in social groups, so the pod is incredibly important. Whales are a little bit different. Some whales, like sperm whales, the ones that we know from stories like Moby Dick, can spend their entire lives in pods, in groups. Other whales, like humpback whales, like we have just here, a model of a humpback whale.
Beautiful.
They can spend...
How about this one?
Yes, there's another humpback. They are... life size is a lot bigger, of course. They can spend times of the year when they're together in very social groups, but they also need and choose to spend time in a very solitary way for some of the year. So whales have more of a mysterious, I would say, solitary nature to them, more than dolphins. It's rare to see a dolphin alone. It's possible, but it's rare. Whales have that time when they need to go into retreat, it seems. So until recently, most scientists didn't even know where a lot of whales went when they migrated away from certain areas. So they have their differences as well. But
yet we always associate them. So that's why I'm putting this question out. Is it one that has more masculine energy versus the other one of feminine energy?
It's a great question. And actually, traditionally, and I mean, the whole approach of my book is to look at the symbolism of dolphins and whales and how they have appeared in our myths and legends and stories over the ages. And if we look at the words, for example, like dolphin, the word dolphin originally comes from a Greek word, which is Delphis. And Delphis meant several things, but one of the main meanings was womb. So the womb is, of course, intrinsically connected with the female, with the feminine. And yet we look at the word whale, and that is linked, well, I mean, in several languages, such as French, for example, baleine. Baleine originally comes from the Greek phalen, which is the inspiration for phallus, or penis. So there's a masculine quality associated with the whale. So if we're looking at this very symbolically, you've got this yin-yang balance. You've got dolphins representing the feminine. You've got whales representing the masculine. Together, collectively, they're called cetacea. You have this wonderful balance of male and female. And again, you know, there's that idea of within cetacea, there's something very complete. There's a wholeness that I think is represented.
And it seems like as human beings, we've always been really drawn to them. And there's so many religions, as you're saying in your book, and legends around them. Absolutely, so many. And Could you tell us some of them, or one of them?
There are so many, but one of the most exciting discoveries for me when I first went on this voyage to find out about dolphins and whales was that to discover cultures and civilizations around the world that held dolphins in high esteem or even worshipped whale-type gods, for example. And yet these cultures live nowhere near the ocean. So, for example, if you go to Petra in Jordan, which is now a very famous tourist destination, it's one of the new 7 wonders of the world, I believe. In Petra, you're in the middle of the desert. You're at least 100, 200 kilometers from the nearest ocean. The Nabatean people who lived in Petra worshipped a dolphin goddess. And they didn't see dolphins in the desert, but on the other hand, they did in their carvings, in their murals, in their amulets, in their spiritual objects. They had a dolphin goddess, and they worshipped this dolphin goddess as a symbol of fertility to help with their growing of crops. So again, another reference to the feminine, the creativity, and the fertility associated with dolphins. And then you go to Mali in Africa, and you have the Dogon people who worshipped as one of their ancestors. In fact, the ancestor who they say was responsible for the Dogon's very beginnings, their origins, who's a creature who lives in the ocean, and they're living in the middle of the desert. So these were some of the most exciting discoveries, was recognizing that dolphins and whales had swum into people's consciousness, into their dreams, into their symbolism, even if they lived nowhere near the ocean. And
how did you explain that through your research? Because I bet you digged in there.
Oh, I was digging. I was digging and swimming and delving and diving. I think there are two sort of ways of looking at this. One is on a practical level. Discussions and talk of dolphins and whales would follow trade routes. So, for example, a lot of people have heard of the Nazca Lines in southern Peru, where you have these lines that create these what are called geomorphs, these huge images in the desert, which are only visible from above, from a plane ride. Or? Not quite crop circles, they're etchings in the sand, but because the area never has rain, the etchings are 800 years old or more, and they're still there. So there are these giant spiders and giant monkeys and a hummingbird, and amongst them is an orca. So you have this huge, what used to be called killer whale. You have this orca a kilometer long in the desert. And so that was a classic example where I wanted to find out, how did the Nazca people not only know about orcas, but how come they were worshipping, it seems, huge orcas in the desert? And it turns out they had direct trade routes with people on the desert, on the ocean front, who would come into the desert, and the Nazcans would go to get supplies, buy fish and so on. It was a several days journey, but they would have this open trade route, and they would hear about these magnificent creatures that lived in the ocean. So I think on one level you've got trading, which explains how lots of stories were passed. But then you've got a more esoteric possibility, which is that many ancient cultures, of course, had, and many still have, shamans, the medicine people, the visionaries, the ones who would go into trance and would have visions. And a lot of the time, people talk about their shamans going into trance-like states and having communication with different animal spirits. And sometimes these would be animal spirits from the ocean. And so when the shaman is talking about this after coming out of the trance, he or she would talk about these dolphins and whales, and the people would then add these symbols to their list of protective totemic animals. So there would be a sort of a literal explanation for how dolphins and whales made it into the...
Look who's coming, is that...
This is one of our 3 black cats who is used to living with hundreds and hundreds of dolphins and whales around. This is Oscar.
Hi, Oscar. Beautiful.
Absolutely. He always comes to say hi.
So tell us about because there's some crop circles too that have been found.
That's right.
Tell us about what you think of those.
They are extraordinary. I'm at a loss. There's
dolphins on those crop circles.
There are at least 4 examples over the last 20 years of crop circles, and I have a couple of photos in my book of these, of dolphins and whales. I mean, unambiguous images of dolphins and whales in the crop circles. I mean, it's not even that you look at it and think, oh, that's kind of like a dolphin shape. I mean, this is the dolphin with the tail and the pectoral fins and the dorsal fin and so on. I am at a loss. I can't explain it. The only thing I'm sure of is it's not a forgery. It's not a fake. As in, I don't believe there are men running out in the middle of the night with planks of wood pressing down corn to make these absolutely perfect shapes. So that's about the only thing I could say I personally am convinced about, that it's not that.
Because you're from England, there's a lot of them there.
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I used to, when I was at university, I would actually go to some of the surrounding areas and see crop circles the morning after a particular one had appeared sometimes, just by chance, because there were so many around. I wasn't going looking, but you'd hear a buzz saying, oh, there's a new crop circle. And I never saw the dolphin ones with my own eyes. I've only seen those in the photographs. Quite why they're appearing, I honestly, I have no idea, but I think it's amazing that they are. And if there is some intelligence, whether it's beyond this planet, whether it's within this planet, whether it's the planet itself trying to give us a message, what would I choose to extract from that? I would choose to extract the idea that maybe we should spend some time looking at dolphins and whales, because they seem to have got a pretty good system together for living in harmony with each other and the environment.
Yeah.
And so, you know, I choose to look at these crop circles as, I can't explain where they come from, but they're a great signpost, and they're a great little nudge. They're like a little yellow post-it note on your fridge that says, pay attention. And I'm very happy to pay attention to dolphins and whales.
Do you think some people say, you know, we're originally ourselves, maybe dolphins and whales, or we're from that lineage?
There are two theories. There's one theory called the Aquatic Ape Theory, and this was put forward by a wonderful revolutionary anthropologist back in the 60s and 70s called Elaine Morgan. And what she said was that absolutely we evolved not in a linear fashion from chimps, as is conventional wisdom, but that we actually evolved through spending time in the water, and we resembled something that we now look at as dolphins and whales. And there are all kinds of evidence she cites for this, such as if you throw a baby into a pool, which not many mothers are very happy to do, but if you do, a human baby has a natural, what's called dive reflex. They stop breathing. In other words, they are not going to accidentally swallow water. Many other mammals do and drown immediately. So this would add credence to the idea that we once did come from some kind of aquatic beginning. But then you go to the other, if we flip time around a bit, there's a very famous Frenchman, he's now died, called Jacques Mayol, and he was a world champion free diver. So he was one of these guys who would go down to 200, 300 meters, which is a phenomenal depth, and would hold his breath for 5 or 6 minutes with incredible pressure. And he would do this through all kinds of yogic breathing practices. He put forward the idea of what he calls Homo delphinus, and he believes not so much that we came from dolphin origins, but that we're heading towards dolphin outcomes, that we are evolving in the direction of spending more time in the water, of breathing more for longer periods, holding our breath for longer periods of time, so that we can basically swim further and deeper. And that as we do this, as babies are born into water birth environments, for example, and feel at home in the water, so dolphins and whales are going to be spending more and more time with us. And he didn't go quite as far as saying there's eventually going to be hybrids, but he said that we will become more delphinic, that's the wonderful word he used, in our lives, and that this will resemble, and in a very positive way, will resemble the lives of dolphins. So he was talking about an evolution that moved towards dolphins rather than a history that came from them.
Yeah. So can you tell us more about how they communicate and how they're interacting among each other? Could that be one of the things that we're heading towards ourselves, our species?
It's possible. There's something extraordinary about the way dolphins in particular communicate. And whales have some differences in their communication style, but one of the major ways dolphins communicate is by the use of echolocation. And so this is how they, in a sense, communicate with their environment and find out what's there. So they send out these little clicks, these pulses of sound, but hundreds every second, far too many, and often at too high a frequency for our ears to hear. These sound bites travel infinitely if there is nothing to stand in their way. They just disappear. But if there's an object, another dolphin or a person in the water, then the sound bounces off that object, comes back to the dolphin picks it up through its lower jaw, that's where it hears most things, and builds this picture in sound. And so we see, for example, you know, when a pregnant woman goes to a hospital for a sound image of the growing baby, that's exactly the world dolphins and whales are living in with their echolocation, but in much, much higher definition than anything medical science has managed. Now, this is where it gets very exciting, because imagine, for example, as a person, if I walk down the street now and I go to the beach and I see a beautiful object, but you're not there, I have to come back and I'm confined to these things I'm using now, words. And the best I can do is be very descriptive and use lots of nice adjectives. And the best you can do is use your imagination to build up this picture that I'm trying to paint with words. So in a sense, we're a bit restricted, because if I were a dolphin and you were a dolphin, I could swim back from my little expedition and I don't have to use words. Maybe I don't even have words. All I can do is replay the echoed sounds. And by replaying those sounds, because remember, they all originated, all the clicks started with me, so I can perfectly imitate the sound of all the echoes. If I replay that, you then get a direct perception. It is as if you were there. It's as if I'm taking a little microchip out of my head and slotting it into your head, so that you are then able to have that perception. You're not getting a description of it, you're actually getting the perception. And so in this way, their communication is perhaps the closest thing we have to what we might call group consciousness. Because if I'm in a pod of dolphins and I've just seen an object over there that's really interesting, I come back to the rest of the pod, I replay the echo, and the whole pod experiences it simultaneously, as if they were all perceiving that object, or that shark, or that person, or whatever it was. And that is incredibly exciting, because the best we can do at humans is to say, hey, guess what I just saw? And then we use all these words. So there's this, in a sense, this group consciousness that dolphins, dolphins particularly, can use in their communication that I find very exciting. I hope, if Homo dolphinus is something we're heading towards, I hope that's one of the aspects we're going to integrate in Homo dolphinus. And meanwhile, whales, they have the most extraordinary form of communication, because they communicate at what's called a subsonic level. It's, interestingly enough, the same frequency that elephants use. So in theory, an elephant standing on a beach in Namibia, which they do, could communicate and does communicate at the same frequency as blue whales, the largest land mammal, the largest creature in the history of the Earth, communicating with each other. And they're doing it at about 3 to 4 hertz, which is very, very low. We wouldn't be able to hear that, but if we were standing near enough, we'd probably be able to feel it. If we put our hand on the sand, we'd kind of feel a distant vibration. When you use that frequency in the ocean, sound travels a very, very, very long way. Also because whales are smart enough to swim down to a certain level where warm water at the top and cooler water beneath meets in what's called a thermocline. And they use this thermocline to make all their sounds. And the sounds get trapped between two levels. It's like a sandwich. And the sound travels out. So for example, it's now been established that whales in the Arctic Ocean, near to the island of Spitsbergen in Norway, have been detected off the island of Bermuda in the Caribbean. That's how far their sound can travel. It can cover half an ocean. It takes a few minutes or even hours to do that. Maybe whales are building up images of the ocean based on sound, just as the Navy does with its sonar. But this is on a whole different scale. This is on a whale scale. And they are building up images of the ocean, so they maybe navigate by saying, oh, you know what, Bermuda's over there. I'm going to head north towards Barbados. And they're doing this by sound. They're getting the sound signature of Bermuda and Barbados. And I think that's incredibly exciting. And again, it's something that if we're evolving in that direction, then we need to become a lot more perceptive and not rely on GPS.
Is there, I mean, do they have intentions, or is it were human beings able to learn and know what they were actually communicating? What I'm trying to ask is there, do they want something more than just fulfilling their needs of traveling and feeding themselves, or? I would
love to know. I'd love to interview a whale. I mean, so far...
How cool! What a great idea! Let's interview a whale in Hawaii.
I would love to interview a whale. All I can tell you is that we do not yet have the dictionary for dolphinese or whalese. We've observed some patterns about the kind of things that dolphins and whales do in their singing and their clicking. Yeah. But we don't yet have a way of decoding what the words mean. But for example, in the South Pacific, which is somewhere I go every year, I take groups of people to swim and get in the water with dolphins and with whales, with humpback whales. Often we'll be floating on the surface of the ocean and we will hear the song of a singing humpback whale, which is an incredibly beautiful, haunting sound. Now, the interesting thing about these whales, and this happens with groups of whales everywhere around the world, is with humpbacks, when they start singing, they sing a song that is absolutely identical to the next time they sing it and the next time they sing it. So it's not just random, it's not jazz, you know, they're not improvising. It's a very strict score of music, as it were, that they're following. And it can last 20, 25, 30 minutes. Then they'll come up and take a breath and they'll probably go and sing, as I say, exactly the same song again. And the interesting thing is, it's not just that whale that's singing that song. Every whale in that area for hundreds of kilometers will be singing exactly the same song. And over the space of a season being the time that they've come to mate and give birth, the song will evolve a little bit. And wherever they leave off at the end of the season, they then go and swim to cold water, they go do their feeding. They haven't eaten for months, they're hungry. When they come back the next year, they start the song exactly where they left off. Now, marine biologists would say this is, they even concede this is an example of culture, something that we always thought was just a human domain. They said this is a learned behavior that shows creativity. It is an example of non-human culture. If you ask the Australian Aborigines, they would go one step further. A traditional belief of theirs is that, well, humpback whales are not just singing songs to attract mates, they're singing the song of creation. So every year, of course, the song changes a little bit because there's more to sing about. There are differences, there's news, there are different ways of looking at the world. So their song changes just as time passes, which I think is a wonderful explanation for what's going on. But we don't know what the song means. But
you must have encountered so many openings and people just listening to this sound that seems for us at a very high frequency, very opening. I mean, the opening of the heart happens when we hear that. So there must be some incredible personal growth.
I think
stories that you've witnessed.
Absolutely. I've seen people...
I just want to go and listen to that and jump in the water.
I've seen people burst into hysterics of laughter. I've seen people crying I would say a very beautiful set of tears. You know, there's a release that comes from being in the water with dolphins and whales. There's a fascination. I mean, once you put your head in the water and you hear, whether it's the singing of a humpback whale or the clicks and whistles of a dolphin, there is something that I think actually touches us, and I mean that in both senses of the word. It tends to touch many people emotionally, but I think it also has a physical element to it. We know, again, in medical science, that sound can do all kinds of amazing things. For example, people with kidney stones or similar stones, sometimes even gallbladder stones, can have these stones smashed by sound. So there's no invasive surgery, just very high frequency sound is able to affect and destroy the stones, and then they're naturally passed out of the body. Well, we know the dolphin's ability to produce these sounds is way more powerful than anything in medical science at the moment. So if medical science can do wonders with sound, imagine what something that's infinitely more powerful can do. I mean, the effect of sound on the body is something we don't fully understand, but it could be that high frequency sounds from dolphins may result in neurotransmitters being released, endorphins being released within the brain, that ultimately then help us heal ourselves. And I mean heal in all kinds of ways, emotionally and physically. And I think that's an important thing to bear in mind, because a lot of the time people, I've heard over the years, have talked about dolphins being healers. And I think they can be. They can have a very healing quality to them. But it's not because they are like doctors or medics, or that we're taking dolphins and putting them on a pedestal. I don't think dolphins would want that, if I can be as bold as to speak on their behalf. I think that what they are helping us to do is to heal ourselves. And whether that's by inspiration, whether that's by looking at them and being inspired and excited, whether it's because their sound is triggering an endorphin that is then helping us physically heal something in our body. The emphasis is on this idea I came up with earlier, which is on being complete as we are. I think they're nudging us towards that. They're not saying, you know, you need me, you know, you need me, you need this species. They're saying, you're actually an amazing species. And, you know, we can give you a few nudges to help you realize that, but wake up, you don't need gurus. And I think that they're, for me, a wonderful example of that. And maybe they're doing that even physiologically with their sound.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for this delicious inspiration.
Pleasure.
Very juicy. We just all, I guess, want to swim in with the dolphins now and spend some time with them.
It's a wonderful thing to do.
Thank you, Jason.
It's a pleasure.
Much love, my beautiful co-creators from Salt Spring Island in BC.